This episode of Raiders Fan Radio is brought to you by DeadPiratesSports.com. That's Raider gear for the Raider family. Check out DeadPiratesSports.com. Raiders Fan Radio. You're listening to Sonny and Murph from the Dago Dungeon. That's right, a podcast by Raiders fans for Raiders fans, the only fans that matter.
Touchdown! Kenny Stabler goes all the way!
We miss you, we love you, and we'll see you in the Hall of Fame.
When you have great coaches, then after you have great coaches, you get great players. You have a great organization, and you tell them one thing. Just win, baby.
I love this team. I think this team can win. I think this team can win.
What is up, Raider Nation? Your old buddy Murph back here again for another fantastic episode of Raiders Fan Radio. Thank you for downloading the show or streaming the show or however you're consuming the podcast. As you know, we're available on we are available on all podcast services. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, CastBox, TuneIn, you name it. If it's out there, we're there. And please, while you're there streaming or downloading it, like us, rate us, subscribe to the show. That definitely helps us out, definitely helps our cause here for the show and keep things rolling. So thank you for those of you that have done that in the past, and thank you to those of you that will do that in the future. Speaking of that, our Facebook fan page is dangerously close to 3,000 likes, and I think we're going to come up with something cool to give away to whoever clicks that button the 3,000th time to like the show's Facebook page. So thank you for doing that. For those of you that have already done that, again, and we'll have to put something together for number 3,000, but help us get that thing going and get to 3,000 by checking it out at Raiders Fan Radio Podcast on Facebook. All right, so let's get into the show here. We're going to call this episode number 74. Had a really cool interview with a really cool guy, great Raider fan, Kenny Stabler. He runs the Pillaging podcast, Pillaging Just for Fun website. Guys, check these guys out. Great interview. Had a lot of fun talking to him. We had so much fun talking that, frankly, it took up the whole episode. Like, we just went ahead and ran the whole thing. So the interview is great. We cover everything from the draft to the current state of the Raiders to living in the Bay Area as a Raider fan to the Vegas move. I mean, you name it, we talked to Kenny about it. So glad to have Kenny here on Raiders Fan Radio, and look forward to working with those guys in the future. They run a great ship, run a great show over there, and we're thankful to call those guys peers and now friends of ours. So thankful for Kenny for joining us. So we'll get to that here in just a minute. Before that, though, we always name our show after a player's number. So this is episode number 74 of Raiders Fan Radio. So we got a couple options there as far as players go. You got Matt Stinchcomb, offensive tackle for the Raiders, who played from 99 to 2003 during Gruden's heyday, of course. Big old guy, 6'6", 330 pounds, out of Georgia. But, you know, I'm going to go with another guy. I'm going to go with Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell, if you guys remember, he also wore number 74, only played for the Raiders for a couple of years, drafted in 2010 and out of the fourth round. But the unique thing about Bruce Campbell was that his size and his speed was such an Al Davis thing that Al couldn't resist drafting him. So Bruce Campbell he still does, 6'7", 314 pounds, and the guy ran a 4.75 40. Al could not resist himself. He had to draft this guy, and as a project, and fortunately for the Raiders, that project didn't really work out. He went on to play for the Carolina Panthers, and Bruce Campbell still plays. He plays in the CFL now for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, but when he wore the silver and black, he wore that number 74. So for episode number 74 here on Raiders Fan Radio, we're going to call this the Bruce Campbell episode. So anyways, thank you again for listening to the show. We're going to play our contact information and let you know how to get a hold of us. I'll tell you, you can always email the show show@RaidersFanRadio.com. You can email me directly, Murph@RaidersFanRadio.com. You can call us, 909-345-3346. And then we'll see you next week. Join us back again here on Raiders Fan Radio for episode number 75, which clearly that's going to be the Howie Long episode. But we got some special things going on next week. Don't want to tell you about it. I'm going to tease it. Catch back up with us because you won't be disappointed, just like you won't be disappointed with our interview right now with Kenny Stapler.
Hey, boys and girls, this is Uncle Mosh. That's right. Somebody actually claims Sonny and Murph. These two. Check them out on their website, RaidersFanRadio.com. You can friend them on Facebook @RaidersFanRadio, or you can like their fan page @RaidersFanRadio Podcast. Hey, I don't tweet. I don't even know how to use a Twitter, but they do. You can tweet them at RaidersFanRadio. Call them. Leave a voicemail if you want. Go old school. 909-345-3346. That's 909-345-3346. Hey, do this. Please subscribe and rate Raiders Fan Radio on iTunes. You can listen to the show on all podcast services like Stitcher, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, and many, many more. Okay, am I done? Did I say all the stuff I was supposed to say? All right, I'm out of here.
All right, Raider Nation, welcome in to Raiders Fan Radio, a fellow podcaster. That's right. Here on Raiders Fan Radio, joining me in the Dago Dungeon is Kenny Stapler. He is the host of the Pillaging podcast. You can find their podcast at pj4f.com. They are part of the Out of Pocket Sports Network. You can also find them on Twitter at Pillage Just For Fun. That's the number 4 fun. They're also on Instagram, _pillaging_podcast, and on Facebook, the Pillaging Podcast. Welcome into Raiders Fan Radio, Kenny.
Hey, how you doing? It's good to be here.
Glad to have you. I know we've been talking for a while and talked about having you in on the show, and so yeah, great to have you here. And it's always interesting talking to fellow podcasters on the show, Kenny.
Absolutely, I'm happy to be here. You guys are going to pick my brain a little bit and hoping to learn more about you as well.
So first off, we'll start off. First off, dude, these non-football Sundays are killing me. I don't know about you, but I don't know what to do with myself on a Sunday afternoon. How about you?
Bro, I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel over here. I'm watching sports I never knew existed. I'm watching guys play Street Fighter for money. It's rough. It's real rough.
It's terrible. Like last week we had the Masters, and I don't know if you're a wrestling guy, but we had WrestleMania, so like that. Like there are those moments and those cool events that go on, but on a day like today, I don't even know if there's a NASCAR race on or something. And I'm not a NASCAR guy, but there's nothing on.
Yeah. And the NASCAR game, the race actually got rained out. I was looking forward to coming home and watching the last stage of Bristol, and it got rained out. I think they had 4 or 5 red flags. They finally called it a day. So those race fans, if you're working tomorrow, too bad. If you're off tomorrow, you get a little extended race action. But again, scraping the bottom of the barrel here if you're a football fan. Not a whole lot to go around. Luckily, we got the draft coming up in less than 2 weeks, so that's something to look forward to.
Absolutely, and we're going to get to some draft talk later, too. I'm interested in picking your brain, as you mentioned, about that. Talking a little bit about the draft because we've had some things here recently, some stories that have come out, including one Niners linebacker that's probably going to influence what the Raiders are going to do in the draft. But hey, before we get to all that, we do want to talk to you a little bit about your show. So as I mentioned, it's the Pillaging podcast. So how'd you get started, man? Tell us about it. Tell us where the Pillaging podcast came from and how you got involved.
Well, long story short, I guess, we had a Raiders fan community that was very active in the comments section at InsideTheBayArea.org or InsideTheBayArea.com/Oakland Raiders. Back then it was Corcoran and McDonald that was writing, and we've been on there for close to a decade. Mercury News came in, if I got this right, they bought the organization out. They started migrating content, and at that point, the way that we were used to the system going was changing. And I looked at an opportunity to take this community and save the community. There's community Raider fans actually all over the world, from here in the Bay Area all the way to Beijing, China. These are guys that meet up. We meet up at tailgates. Whenever I travel, I try to meet up with guys that might be in the area where I'm going. And we really just come together like a fraternity of Raider fans, Raider Nation. And that was special. The site was originally just to be a glorified comment section, have a background in writing. I started writing a couple articles, felt good, looked pretty good, got a little bit of traction there. And then one day I'm in the D lot before a game and I'm talking to Raider Kane, and he says, "Hey, you got a studio, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been doing music for probably close to 2 decades now." And he said, "Let's do a podcast." I said, "Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I was about to ask you the same question." So it started off with Kane and I basically making use of what we already had. We had a great platform, a great foundation of Raider fans already built in. Started doing the podcast. I had a podcast before that was non-football related, and had a little bit of experience there. And then I basically took to Twitter and started pushing the damn thing. And now we're rolling. Now we got a real fan base that extends beyond our community. And was glad to meet up with you guys. But in a nutshell, that's basically our story. It just kind of started with a community of Raider fans, just like every good podcast should, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you were doing music and you were doing podcasts of non-football related, but did you kind of get bit by the bug? At least that's what it was for us, is that once we started it, and I guess we always kind of had an affinity for radio, and just, and we've actually got some family members that do like real terrestrial radio, and we got some uncles that have done that for a living and still do to this day. And so we've always kind of had an affinity for it, but once we started doing it, and we just kind of got bit by it. Is that what you found too? Once you started doing it, you're like, oh man, this is like, it scratched a creative itch kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like I said, I've been doing music for a long time, and now that industry is so flooded, it's very frustrating to release something and no one's really checking for it. And then to do a podcast, how supportive Raider Nation is, to see that your voice is actually going out to people and people are enjoying it. And you pray somebody listens to it. You just pray. And we're very thankful to have a great fan base, very interactive fan base. And once it started gaining that traction and you're seeing people actually care, they're paying attention, they're listening to what you have to say, it really starts to get addictive at that point, because now you feel like you're not just doing it for yourself. We didn't do it for the ratings, but I think anybody that's a member of Raider Nation really kind of gets over by connecting with other Raider fans. You see a guy in public wearing a Raider shirt or a Raider hat, you can walk right up to him and start a conversation. And I think that's essentially what the podcast is all about, in the podcasting community, because Raider Nation is really strong on the airwaves, I would say. We don't have a dedicated radio station anymore, at least for a little bit of time. It looks like Vegas is going to get after that. But here in the home market, especially, 95.7 sort of throwing up their hands. KMBR does a little bit, but they're primarily a Niner station, San Francisco Giants station. And we're thankful to have such a strong community on here with your guys' podcast included. Raider Lounge, Silver and Black, or Black Hole Banter. There's just a lot of them cropping up, and they're all pretty good. I always look at it as not competition, but community. And I think everybody's voice is important. It's great that the Raider Nation now has so many options online to tune in and get their Raider commentary, almost 5 days a week now, depending on what your podcast listening schedule is. So that's kind of where we got to it. And yes, to answer your question, Murph, it's very addictive, and it does scratch an itch to be like, you know what, I can get on here and talk about these things and actually let other people come in here, and their voice is what's the most important thing to us as well, because we wouldn't be a show without an audience. And we really, really respect the people that listen, and really, again, leading to this opportunity to join you today. This is fantastic. So two great powers collide, as they would say in WrestleMania.
Absolutely. So. I totally agree. And I think that, we're football fans, so you're competitive. Like, you're competitive in, you thrive on. It's what the whole sport is based on. But I don't think that it's necessary for us to compete as podcast proprietors, or whatever you want to call us, because compete with each other. Like, if you ever listen to Jay Moore, he talks about comedians. He always says, like, why don't comedians all retweet each other's dates? Like, why we're never in the same town at the same time? Like, there's plenty of comedy to go around. Like, why don't we all support each other? And I always think of, like, our podcasting community is the same thing. Like, there are lots of hours in the day, and we occupy like 90 minutes. Like, there is plenty of room for all of those those shows. And so I agree with you. I think that we could always do a better job of supporting one another, and especially when there's a need for it. There's a, and that to not only give Raider Nation a voice, but to just have our team represented out there on, the internet airwaves, I think is definitely important. And I tell you, one of the things that I like about your show too, and one of the reasons that I'm glad that we linked up today is that, with everyone that's out there, and we'll never, please, anybody out there, I don't never want to disparage what anybody else is doing with their fandom and their shows. But when you listen to a show like the Pillaging Podcast, it's a show. It's produced. It's a very well done show, and I like to think that that's what we take pride in as well, and that's important. Is that anybody can flip on, and again, I'm not taking a shot, so please save your emails out there. Anybody can flip on a Facebook Live feed. Anybody can do things like that. Nothing wrong with those things, but if a show to me is something that's produced and time goes in, and Kenny, you and I haven't even talked about this at all, but I promise you there is way more than just 1 or 2 hours that goes into putting your show together. It's likely 6 or 7 hours per episode, right?
Absolutely correct. And I feel the same way about your guys. Sound quality is huge, and it's got to be pleasing to the ears. And after that, it's got to be entertaining. As far as information goes, and this is kind of how I take it, with now Twitter and the cell phones in our hands, we have, as fans, access to as much information as possible. So are we trying to be correct? Yes. Are we trying to sound smart? Absolutely. But first and foremost, we want to be entertaining. We want you to put on the show, feel like you're hanging out in the room with us and being immersed in a conversation that you might have with your buddy. And that's kind of like how we got to it. Kane and I have these conversations in the parking lot. He recorded remotely, and then now we bring on Che, who's been a good friend of mine, a good Raider friend of mine for some time now. He's actually able to sit in studio, which bumps up the chemistry a little bit. We still have Kane involved in the show, and now you got 3 guys that know each other really well. We like to joke around. It's all about having a good time. And if you're listening to the show, I want you to learn something. I want you to, mostly learn stuff from the guys that we bring on. I'm not out here trying to say I'm smarter than the next fan. But I want you to be entertained. I want you to have a good time while you listen to the show. And that's what I get out of Raiders Fan Radio, not to be scratching each other's backs over here. But, I find you guys very entertaining. You're funny. You have great voice. The sound quality is great. I'm not reaching for the volume knob every 30 seconds. And I feel like I'm listening to something that people actually put some time into. And that's a craft right there. That's where the art actually comes into podcasting. And, like you said, you can just turn on your phone and call it a podcast, but you can't necessarily say it's entertaining. So I have a lot of respect for you guys. A lot of what we've done, we've sort of modeled after you guys in terms of what does a Raiders podcast need to be? What does it need to sound like? And on the other side of that, just the history of what I listen to as a musician coming from a musical family. People always asking me all the time, Kenny, what are you listening to? What's in your box right now? And I got to tell them, like, KMBR. I listen to a lot of sports talk. I listen to a mostly non-sports related podcasts, a lot of comedy stuff. And I don't know. I've been a Howard Stern fan for years, and recently in the last 3 really got hooked on podcasts. And so just kind of listening to what I like to hear and trying to put that into the show. And yeah, it's a lot of pre-work. It's a lot of post-work. The easy part is when you're actually on the microphone. That's the fun part. Everything else, as you know, can be quite tedious.
Yes, absolutely. It's almost like when you hear players talk about playing the game, like when they retire, it's like, what do they miss? And they always say they miss game days. They don't miss, the practices, and they don't miss, mini camp, and they don't miss all that. They miss game day. And to me, that's what it's all about. That's what drives myself and Uncle Mosh and Sonny and anybody that's ever been part of our show is that, it's getting on the microphone. And this is the fun part right here, talking to a fellow Raider fan, especially a fellow podcaster. Like this is the best. So all right, so let's talk a little bit about you. So we know about your show. Now tell us about where you're from. Tell us about your fandom, your origins of being a Raider fan.
Oh wow, yeah. So I live out here in the South Bay. I'm about an hour south of the Coliseum. I've pretty much grown up down here all my life. I've spent some time in Salinas, some time out in Santa Cruz. I've even been up in Santa Rosa. But right now I'm in the 408. I'm in Santa Clara County. Growing up, my dad was pretty much the only Raiders fan in our family. It was my dad, and then I had my uncle on my mom's side. He was also a Raiders fan. But everybody else in my family, 49ers fans. So growing up as a kid, real young, I wasn't too into sports. I'm talking like 7 years old. It bored me. I wanted to watch cartoons, And then I think I was about 8 years old. My dad had tapes of Super Bowls and Raider games. My dad still tapes games to this day. And we were watching, I think it was Super Bowl against the Eagles, which was my first exposure to really sitting down and watching an entire game. As an 8-year-old would, I had a million questions for my dad about these guys wearing black, who I thought just looked so cool. They had this swagger. And then I got hooked on football. And then, you're sitting around watching TV in the afternoon, and NFL Films comes on, which is just poetry for the football fan, right? That's just it's football porn, man. If you don't like NFL Films productions, you're in the wrong sport, because it's absolutely incredible. Then I started just digesting those. As you guys know, there's several classic ones about the Oakland Raiders, the Autumn Wind. And when I first heard the Autumn Wind, I got chills, man. I got goosebumps, and really started digging in to Raiders lore at that time and picking my dad's brain. And eventually I would get to go to a game. That was still quite early. We were still in Los Angeles at that time. But after high school, I remember when the Raiders returned to the Bay Area, my dad, he took the whole family out to the game. And I think him and I were the only ones that were like really into it. My brother, and not so much. My mom was there for the family day. But it was that moment that I walked into the Oakland Coliseum. I knew I wanted to be back here on Sundays as much as possible. As you know, it's quite expensive to bring a family out there. So it probably wasn't until 1998 entered John Gruden that I actually had a group of friends that were all Raiders fans with some expendable income, and we started going to games. We went to probably 6 out of 8 home games every season from that point all the way up until the 2005 season, at which point work kind of pulled me away. But now I'm back. Now I'm back at the Coliseum. You can catch me nearly every weekend out there in the D lot or in the neighboring lots, just kind of bumping around. We got our Pillaging tailgate, and that's how it came to be for me, man. Just thinking that these guys look so cool, watching probably one of the best games I could have entered into the fandom and to the Raider Nation with, and then just sticking with it. I think the mystique captures a lot of us, and that's what really reeled me in, was the mystique of the Oakland Raiders, or the Los Angeles Raiders at that time, to be fair. But just really the silver and black, the personalities on the team, and the culture of just win, baby,
What's amazing is that as many people as we talk to, how many of us share that similar thing? It comes from our dads or uncles, or and it's that early exposure, and how these guys are almost like superheroes. We talked when we had Phil Villapiano on a couple of months ago. It was like, I was trying to explain, like I was freaking out. I like when we got off, I was trying to keep my fanboy in check while we were talking to him. But when we got done, it was like, because this is a guy that I heard, because, I was a young kid in the 70s. And so, like, when it was in the 80s and the 90s, and we heard these stories of these players, this is pre-internet, and it was so the only way that, like you mentioned, it was either catching players on NFL Films, on a replay of Black Sunday or whatever. Even that was post Villapiano. So, there's so many just these shared stories that these guys, you get them built up, and they're almost like superheroes in it, and it forms your fandom at such an early age, and it gets formed in such an, almost like there's so much, as diverse as we are, we all have that similar commonality with our fandom. I love that. It's great stuff. So you mentioned that game, obviously, when we beat the Eagles, is a great memory. Heck, your timing was perfect as far as getting back up and running there in '98 to get to go to games. What's your best? Give me your best Raider memory. Give me your most fond memory of being a Raider fan.
Honestly, this comes as recent as last year. I've seen a lot of great games in the Coliseum. I remember watching us blow out the Buccaneers. It was like 45-0 or something ridiculous like that. That was cool. But I think the best moment I ever had at the Coliseum as a Raider fan was Thursday Night Football last year, and the timeless victory win against the Kansas City Chiefs. I was just shaking for a couple days after that. We actually recorded on location for that game too, which was, it was cool to come out of there and actually give our takes, because I had never seen anything like that in person in my entire life. And for me, that was absolutely stunning. Just an incredible moment, and never thought I would have that so late in life, but alas I did. And I'll never forget that. And I'm hoping that nothing ever that close happens for us again. We hope everything is a shutout victory, but that's not the case, and that's not the Raider way. But if I had to point to one event in the timeline of my time as a member of the Raider Nation, it's got to be Thursday Night Football last year. That was just incredible. What
do you think is, and I was going to ask you about this later, but it really kind of relates. It's something I want to get your take on. You know, you grew up with, obviously you're a California guy. Me too. I haven't lived there for a long time, but you know, grew up, born and raised in the Bay Area, born and raised in San Jose, California. The Raiders, I've seen the Raiders come and go in my lifetime, and we're getting ready to see them leave again. Now, I don't live there anymore, so them leaving, going to Vegas is not really much any different. I'm not going to go to any less games. My life as a Raider fan isn't going to change much with them going to Vegas. But you just mentioned your favorite Raider memory. It was last year in the Oakland Coliseum, in that moment when Derek Carr threw that touchdown pass to Michael Crabtree in the front corner of the end zone. How does that translate to Vegas? What is your expectation? I mean, I'm assuming you're going to, we hadn't talked about this. I don't know. I'm assuming though, you're going to keep going with the show and you're going to keep being a fan, but what is that? What is your take on it, man? What are you thinking about them going to Vegas?
Well, it's complicated, you know, as a Bay Area Raiders fan, it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it hits you in waves. It hit me the day it was announced, and I was kind of in denial. And as it kind of came through to me, as it kind of sunk in, I was really disappointed. And I'm sure that's going to hit me even harder when they leave. I was talking to some friends the other day about going to the Battle of the Bay, and it was mentioned this is going to be the finale. And I was like, wow, that's real. This is the last time that, I mean, unless we play the Niners next year, we finish with a similar record, and we ended up facing them next year in one of those toss-up games. This is likely the last Battle of the Bay. Now, it's not happening in the Coliseum, but still, this is for Bay Area fans. That rivalry is a big deal. Those of you guys listening outside of California, maybe you don't think it is, but for us, when this happens, this is a Super Bowl. This is even arguably bigger than a AFC West rivalry for a lot of us. This is big time bragging rights in the Bay Area. Going back to my story as a Raider fan as a child, wearing my Raider starter jacket to school and getting people trying to take you down a notch, people tormenting you because you're a Raiders fan. I love that. I was like, bring it on. I know you hate us. That's what I like about it. But getting back to it, it's hard because as a fan, I don't think anybody disagrees that the Raiders deserve a really nice stadium. They deserve a shiny silver and black stadium with the everything up to date, high tech, a Raiders Hall of Fame, the works, and we're going to get that, but we're not going to get it in the Bay Area. So for me, looking at it as just a fan, it's tough. I'm going to want to go to games. I'm going to go to some games. I don't know that I'm going to be able to afford season tickets. In fact, I know I can't. I don't know how many games I can afford to go to, because when you wrap the travel around it and the room and the board and the fact that you're making an entire possibly 3-day weekend out of attending this one game that also eats into your work schedule, and just logistically that does not work out for the average fan. And let's face it, I'm the average fan. I'm not big balling. I'm not buying Maseratis with my pillaging just for fun checks. Yet.
There we go.
That's not happening. So it's really bittersweet, because here I am. I see the team that I love getting something that it deserves so much, but I'm seeing an entire fan base getting it ripped away from them. So I think the hardest part about this is the divide that it's creating. Now it's simmered down a little bit amongst the fans. When it first happened, you had a lot of out-of-state fans really happy about this. Maybe they're moving closer to you and you're happy about that. Maybe you're just happy about the state-of-the-art stadium. That's fair. You got a lot of Bay Area fans on the other extreme that jumped off the ship. There's people that shut down their Twitter accounts. They're no longer Raiders fans. Some of them no longer football fans. And I get that. For me, I'm a Raiders fan. I'm a member of Raider Nation. I'm not a member of Oakland Nation. I didn't grow up in Oakland. And those of you listening that are part of that Stay in Oakland movement, don't take this the wrong way. This is just where I stand. I'm always going to be a Raiders fan. It just got that much harder for me to kind of do it the way that I like to do it, if that makes sense. I think that's, for me, the saddest thing is seeing Raider fans leave, seeing Raider fans even possibly take up new teams, and seeing Raider fans really just argue with one another. And we're not arguing draft picks. We're arguing loyalty. And that's really tough to watch. And then what's continued right now is you have this kind of lightweight civil war amongst the media members, which is also looking to simmer down a little bit. But you got guys out here that have been covering the team just for years, some of them for decades. Jerry McDonald comes to mind. Vic Tafer's been great. I mean, just a long list of great reporters, great personalities, great writers that are now also having this team pulled away from them and out of their market. Whether or not some of them continue to cover the team going forward, I don't know. I don't even know if that's their decision. They work for a local paper. Likely they're not covering a team that's no longer local. So that's tough. The whole thing is just really complicated. It's multifaceted. There's layers to it. But for me, I'm happy the team's going to get what they get. It's really sad that they're leaving. And then the fact that they're landing in Las Vegas is just very surreal, if you know what I mean. Like, we're going to have a football team in Las Vegas, and that team is going to be your team, the Oakland Raiders. So it's hard for me to stomach. I'm not going to stop being a Raiders fan. That just runs too deep for me. Growing up, also, watching them from afar in LA, and people say, oh, LA's pretty close. It's not much further than Las Vegas, to be quite honest with you. They're very, as far as taking a plane trip, it's equitable, but they're no longer a California team. And so they might as well be on the East Coast for me, because there's a lot of hoops I got to jump through to get to that game. It's not easy for me. But those of you that are Raider fans that live out in the Vegas area, you live in Nevada, you live in the surrounding states, hey, good for you. I'm happy for you. But I'm kind of one of those people that's right in the middle. I know that's rare. This is a very hot take subject. I think a lot of people are very emotional about it, and I've had to temper that. Obviously, now being a part of the media, you have to temper that. You have to try not to go full fanboy. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't hard. I'm just right now trying to be a little bit more nearsighted and enjoy the time that they're here, and just praying to God that we get an AFC championship or possibly even a Super Bowl championship before they leave. I feel like it's a bit of a long shot, but that would just be that would be something that I want before they go. We'll make it a little bit easier, I suppose. But it's tough. It's tough, Murph.
It's a topic we hadn't talked about recently, at least not on our show, because we always want to keep it, Al Davis, the greatness of the Raiders is in its future, right? Like, we don't ever want to kind of dwell on the things that we don't really have much control over, or things that have already happened. So we haven't talked about a lot, but it's hearing you and hearing the passion in your voice talk about it. It really kind of fires me up a little bit too, because I don't think, here's the thing that I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way to feel as a Raider fan. And like you mentioned, the stay in Oakland people, like, keep doing what you're doing. Like, we love it that you're doing that. The people that are like, yeah, okay, goodbye, see you in Vegas. Great. That's the way that your fandom comes out. That's fine. Neither one of those are wrong. And the whole idea of who's a true fan, who's not a true fan, who's a bandwagon, who's not, there is no such thing. It's, are you a fan? What does your fan manifest in you? And whatever it is, that's just going to be okay. And I think that if we as Raider Nation would just kind of accept that in one another, that look, we're all going to take this different for different reasons. And, I think number one, even from everybody we've talked to, from the New York guys, the Texas folks, the people that are out west, everybody agrees they should be the Oakland Raiders. Heck, I'll bet you if you caught him in a candid moment, Mark Davis wants them to be the Oakland Raiders. But the truth is that it's not going to be that way. They're going to be the Las Vegas Raiders, and then we're left to pick up those pieces and to figure out what we're going to do with it. What I think also is unique is something that's happened here lately, is that this is a unique situation, a unique dynamic for us as fans and for the entire market. Now, you're right in the middle of it. You know better than I do. And the reason I want to ask you about this is that recently the Raiders kind of got criticized for supporting the Las Vegas Golden Knights in their Stanley Cup push. Also in that Stanley Cup push are the San Jose Sharks. Now, there hasn't been a ton of reciprocity between those two teams during their existence, but the whole point was that the Raiders supported the team in the market that they're going to and didn't say anything about the Sharks. And so you got these dynamics that come up. Now, my take on it is that, well, the A's sold out the Raiders a long time ago and no one criticized them. The Warriors are already on their way out too. So it's not like there's a lot of, if anything, the Raiders have showed grace and extended to the Warriors here in their last couple times and making championship runs. But outside of that, you don't really see a lot of reciprocity in these teams. And so do you think it's fair for the criticism that the Raiders and Mark Davis is getting for his support of the Vegas teams? And how has that kind of stirred up fandom in the Bay Area? What are you seeing with all that?
To answer the first question, no, I don't think it's fair. I think it's actually quite predictable. The Raiders, you're right. They've never shown love to the Sharks before. I'm a fan of the boys in teal. I'm rooting for my Sharks. But what's happening here is Vegas, the Knights and the Raiders are essentially the two first people on the dance floor. So they might as well dance with each other. This is professional sports history that they're making going to Las Vegas. So that makes sense of it like that. To me, it's logical. They're there supporting each other because there's nobody else there to support them. And so they're sort of married at the hip. They're entering this untapped world for the first time. And they're in there together. They're showing solidarity together. The other thing too is the Golden Knights. They're a pretty popular thing right now. They're the most popular show in town if it comes to the NHL. And I'm not talking about Red Wings fans aren't out there rooting for the Knights just because they're a brand new team. But anytime you get an expansion team enter any league and they come in kind of hot, they're a sexy pick. People like that. The Golden Knights, they play well. They look good. Again, it's Vegas. All eyes on Vegas all the time. It seems to be the epicenter of entertainment in our nation. So I see that as quite predictable. Out here, I don't know, man. I'm not really hearing too much chatter about it. I'm not hearing too many people complaining about it. A lot of my fans, though, to be fair, that are Sharks fans, they're not Raiders fans. A lot of them are actually Niners fans. Yeah. But so I've really had that conversation with too many Raiders fans, and it's not that every football fan in the Bay Area is also a hockey fan. I think, you're from San Jose. I'm from San Jose. It's sort of in our blood to be Sharks fans. But the further out you get from that, you can go just not too far up the Highway 5 to Sacramento, and they're not crazy about the Sharks up there. You're going to find pockets of fans that are hockey fans that are rooting for them because it's, Northern California team. But, I haven't experienced that myself. And as far as the support between them and the Knights, again, I think that's quite predictable with two teams now entering Vegas at roughly the same time. They're there to support each other, and I think that's what that's all about. If the Knights had existed in Vegas for a long time before this, I don't know that you see this kind of love going back and forth, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're pioneers out there in the Vegas territory.
Is that South Bay market, is it still, Niners, Giants? Like growing up for me, I was an Oakland sports fan. It was A's, Raiders, Warriors. And it was like where I lived and the people I went to school with, of course. And when I was going to school, I'll tell you how old I am here, but when I was in high school, like the Niners were in their heyday. Like everybody was a freaking Niner fan. And I was like the only guy at all my buddies and stuff that was a Raider fan, and my family Raider fan. But anyways, we were Oakland sports fans, but the South Bay was, it was Niners and Giants. Is that still kind of what it's like now? Like everybody's, especially now the Raiders leaving?
Here's the thing about Niner fans, and I'm not sure where they're getting them, but they wear these NFL licensed cloaking devices so that anytime their team drops below 500, they just sort of disappear. Raider fans, we wear the shield every day. We lose on Sunday, and I'm seeing Raider jerseys still on Monday. So if I had to venture a guess, it's pretty close to 50-50. I got a lot of Raider fans in my area, a lot of Niner fans in my area. I grew up being an A's Giants fan. I grew up watching baseball in the 80s when you had, the Bash brothers on one side of the bay. You had Hum Baby on the other side of the bay. My family was, again, split kind of down the middle, A's Giants fans. I liked both teams growing up. I was too young to really understand the rivalry. There wasn't a lot of interdivision games at that time. And, of course, then there was the Battle of the Bay, and it was so prolific that the earth shook and split open. So I think, I've always been down the middle as far as baseball is concerned. But, if I had to do a demographic map, I would have it probably 50-50 with the Niners disappearing every 4 years or so and then reappearing when they sign a hot young quarterback. So we'll see. One thing about Raider Nation is we're thick-skinned, and we're ride or die. So we're going to the Super Bowl every year, regardless of what you think.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny you said that too, because I had this argument with Sonny, mostly off the show. He's a diehard A's fan, and when the Giants had their run, they won the 3 World Series in 5 years, and I would root for them openly and be like, how do you, as an A's fan, how can you root for the Giants? I'm like, when I was a kid, I'm like, there wasn't like this passionate rivalry between the teams. It was long before the A's tried to move and the Giants laid claim to the fan base and all that. I'm like, that was way before all that. I'm like, back when I was a kid, I remember going to A's Giants exhibition games, and people would wear like hats and jerseys that were like split in half. You remember those?
Yeah.
It was like Giants one side, A's on, because there was before interleague play. I'm like, this isn't like a deep-seated rivalry from. I'm like, you know, it maybe is now a little more so, but you know, and it's an economic rivalry if anything. I'm like, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same. But anyways, this is Raiders fan radio, so let's talk a little bit more about the Raiders. So,
Yes.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So your favorite moment was last year when that Thursday night football game. Mm-hmm. Give me your least favorite moment. Was it the announcement of the Raiders leaving? Like, what was your toughest time? I mean, you know, for me, I could think of some Jamarcus Russell games that really tested my fandom. What about you, man?
I think, like many other Raider fans, I was watching Raiders versus New England Patriots in the playoffs. What was that? 01?
Ooh, Yep.
And
January 19th.
it was all Raider fans in the room. We had one Niner fan, but he was kind of
2002, I guess, was technically, but it was the 2001 season. Yeah.
Calendar year 02, season 01. We had one Niner fan in the room that was kind of on board with us, Bay Area team. He said, I'm just going to root for the Bay Area team. And one Patriots fan in the room. It wasn't in his house, yet he had the recliner seat. He had the best seat in the room, and he's just kicking back with his feet up. And it was almost like he knew all along something was going to happen. And the look on his face, the smug look on his face, is probably the worst moment in my fan as a Raider Nation. How that guy got out of the house with all of his limbs intact, I don't know. I guess we're a classy bunch. Maybe one of my biggest regrets today was not getting an arm or a leg, but you know, I think that was it, because as Raider fans, we all knew at that point that was just the beginning. It felt like something more was going to happen. Another shoe was going to drop. And before you know it, John Gruden's on a plane to Tampa. And when the start of the 02-03 season began, I said to myself, we're going to see these guys in the Super Bowl. I know it. And he's going to be walking up and down that sideline with our playbook in his hands, and it's not going to be pretty. So I think the first part of my worst experience was the tuck rule night, and then the second part was I had planned the Super Bowl party at my house. I had my ribs all ready. They've been smoking for hours. I was good to go, and I turned on the TV, and I saw the news that we had lost our starting center, and I had that feeling in my gut. I said, you know, I knew it wasn't going to be pretty. I knew it was going to be close, but at that point I felt like it's a wrap. And that feeling in my gut just sat with me all afternoon. Nobody showed up to the party. Thank God. I had a couple people stroll in, but we were all communicating that morning. We all kind of had our heads in our hands, and it took the window out of our sails early. And so I think just that period from what was it, January 02 all the way up to February 03, if I'm right there, that whole period was just really a kick in the balls for me. I mean, it was fun watching the team under Callahan. We had a great season, but just kind of knowing what was, it's like you know you're going to break up with your girlfriend in 4 months because she's leaving, or you're leaving, like you're shipping out to the military. You know it's over. You're trying to enjoy it while it lasts, but just that impending doom on the horizon. I think that feeling stretched out over the entire year really killed me as a Raiders fan. That was a tough one to bounce back from. Anybody
but Gruden, and we win that game running away. It's just that was the toughest thing to sit there and watch that. And, you know, and as fans, we all have opinions, and we all are great armchair quarterbacks. But I think even the most uneducated of football fan, or anybody that knew even a little bit about the game, could have told you that going into that game, you probably should switch up your offense away from the guy that invented it, because he's over there on the other side. Switch up the calls, switch up the audibles, do something, the verbiage, the cadence, something different to try to, but no, Callahan went in there, and I don't know what, to this day, and I've heard a lot of people talk about that game, from Jerry Rice, Timmy Brown, you name it, Romo, I mean, you hear a lot of people talk about that game. I still can't figure that. I still can't wrap my brain around what Callahan and that coaching staff was thinking going into that Super Bowl. Because I'm with you. I had a smattering of friends show up for a Super Bowl party. There's about 6 of us. We had a whole keg of beer to ourselves and did our best to finish it. I used to drink back then. Did our best to finish it because that was a brutal game to try to sit through, man. I mean, that was pretty rough. That's definitely way up there, man.
And I think a close runner-up was the AFC Championship game against the Baltimore Ravens, watching Gannon get smushed, and you just saw it all just fade away at that point. You knew exactly what was going to happen after that, and that's my close runner-up. But definitely Tuck Rule all the way to the Super Bowl loss, that extended period of torture, I'll call it.
All right, we're getting close on time here, so let me throw a couple more things at you, and then I want to get to just a couple Raider stories, some of the offseason. So one last thing about your fandom. So on Mount Rushmore, the Mount Rushmore of Raider fans. So we'll spot Al Davis because you can't have Mount Rushmore of Raiders, and this could be coaches, this could be players. You can't have a Mount Rushmore without Al. So we give you Al. Who are the next 3?
The next 3, man, that's a tough one. I gotta go Ken Stabler right there. So you got Davis and you got Stabler up there. I'm tempted to put Jackson up there, but just didn't have a long enough run. I got to put Tim Brown up there. So I got to go Tim Brown, Al Davis, Ken Stabler, and Charles Woodson. Obviously, I'm leaving a lot of guys off, but I think a lot of people in my generation, when you think of the Raiders, those are the faces that come to mind. And I wasn't even young enough to watch Stabler. Most of the games I've seen with Stabler are all, re-airs or NFL highlight films, NFL films. But Stabler, I'd be remiss if the snake wasn't on there, and definitely Tim Brown was a stalwart for us, and just the love that the nation shows Woodson. You go out to the Coliseum on a Sunday, you're going to see more 24 and 81 jerseys than anything out there, and I got to go, Woodson, Brown, Stabler, Davis.
I love that list, and I'm like you. I never got a chance to see Stabler play live, but I think he pretty much just epitomizes those teams of the 70s, and you think about all the characters and all the, talent on and off the field that they had. Nobody, characterizes that era better than Stabler. And then I think same thing when you go to those middle ages, for lack of a better word, of the Raiders. Timmy Brown is that guy, and then Woodson, the way he closed it out, that was tough seeing him. It wasn't tough seeing him be successful, but it was tough seeing him wear a uniform that wasn't silver and black. But when he came back, man, the pride that he shows even to this day in being a Raider, I know that for me, that's what won me over with him and put him on my all-time list, because I'm with you. I think he's one of my guys on Mount Rushmore. In fact, he's the wallpaper on my computer, man, that I do this show, man, is Charles Woodson, and I think that he epitomizes certainly the modern day Raider. And probably next on that list is coming up is going to be Carr and Mack, one of those two guys.
You would hope. And just a quick addendum, part of me becoming a Raider fan and missing those games of the 60s and 70s was reading Ken Stabler's book, The Snake. Oh, and if you're a junkie for Raider stories, like Raider player stories, that's the book you need to read right there.
Keeper of the Twos, that chapter alone sells that dang book, man. It's an amazing book. I agree. I agree. All right. So, well, hey, real quick, before we let you go, and first off, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you joining us here. It's been great talking to you. Real quick, pj4f.com. That's pillagingjustforfun.com. Check out Kenny there. Check out his show is the Pillaging Podcast, and they're on Twitter at pillagejust4fun. Instagram, the Pillaging Podcast, and then Facebook, the Pillaging Podcast. But let's talk about the Raiders. Let's talk about the team before we let you get out of here. So let's talk about some of your off-season thoughts, man. So, we're coming up to the draft. We've had a couple of recent developments. We know that Conley has had surgery, so his health is questionable again. We have the Reuben Foster situation going on with the Niners. You also mentioned earlier that, anybody can get information. Anybody can kind of get the news. So we're going to operate with the assumption that the folks listening to us, you kind of are hip to what the stories of the day are. Tell us what your overall look has been from what the Raiders have done this offseason and what your expectations are going into this draft here in a couple weeks.
So far in the offseason, the free agency moves. Free agency went down kind of like I thought it would. The big surprise for me there was Nelson and Rashawn Melvin. Those are two quality players we got at a discount, and especially Melvin. When you look at the price tag attached to corners that were getting signed just within that week alone, the fact that I know Melvin's just a one-year deal and sort of a prove-it deal. This is a kid that's coming in with a giant chip on his shoulder. I feel like he's got a ton of ability, and it, for me, was the bargain signing of the offseason. So I thought the free agency period, this first period, because we're going to get another second wave after the draft as guys are released and we kind of ramps up one last time. But I thought this first wave of free agency played out like I expected it to. In fact, maybe a little bit better than. We still haven't re-signed Bum, and we'd like to see that happen. That most likely will happen. But I was happy with it. I think a lot of folks are disappointed, but we got volume. Not all these guys are going to stick to the roster. We'll see if a guy even like Martin makes it the opening cut. He might be a Trent Richardson sort of flyer type player. But I thought with what they had to work with, they did well. Sad to see Seabass signing with the Seahawks. If we'd let him go, I wanted him to just kind of walk off into the sunset, but good for him. We'll see him again this year. I think we see him twice this year, once in the preseason, once in the regular season. So offseason, my favorite signing so far has to be Melvin. I think Nelson is an upgrade just based on his ability to coach. I think Crabtree, I'm not going to buy into all the locker room cancer stuff. We know he's an emotional guy from his time in San Francisco. I'm not going to go with the full-blown diva take. I have a lot of respect for Michael Crabtree, but I do think that Nelson is probably a better coach on the field than Crabtree, just from a personality standpoint, from what I've heard. And that's exactly what Amari Cooper needs, is a guy that can show him the ropes, just so he can finally take that step of being a reliable, solid go-to wide receiver. He's definitely a playmaker. He's definitely got the talent to explode, but we need him to be the guy that Carr can look to first on every play and just know that he's the sure catch, which we haven't had yet. And that's been an issue for him coming even out of college. So I think Nelson is an upgrade to other players as well as just to the wide receiver core in general. So that's kind of my thoughts on free agency. We played it safe because we had to. I'm still not sure what to make of who's in charge. What I did like to see is the coaching staff seem to be very vocal in their needs and their wants. We got guys that fit the scheme, and we have a very focused scheme now, especially on defense. You know what PG is coming in here to do. I don't think we ever quite knew what Kenny Norton Jr. was trying to accomplish on this Raiders team. It just didn't seem very focused. It seemed like a lot of experiments. It seemed like possibly a lot of meddling from the rest of the coaching staff. But now with the I think really ultimately my favorite stuff that's happened so far in this offseason were the coaching acquisitions. So we got a lot of guys that are some of the best in their field, not the top, but I'd say a lot of top 5, top 10 position coaches now coming in, and just seeing the effect of the Gruden name and charisma has on bringing people in like that, and the willingness to work with him and the curiosity of working with him is very exciting for me. It should be for the rest of our fan base, and certainly seems so for the rest of the coaching staff. Going into the draft, we just had, I think it was Levi Damien this last week. So I'm going to kind of steal his words. He said he hates this draft because it can go a million different directions. As we're looking at it right now from a distance, it would seem that this is a very loaded draft. Now, it's probably not going to wash out that way. You're going to see guys definitely not living up to the hype. But right now, it's really tough to call. You still have a team, even after our free agency, with a lot of holes on the roster. And if not holes, a lot of positions that could at least drastically be improved. Middle linebacker or linebacking squad in general, you can argue yes or no, because you got guys that are unproven there like Morrow and James and Lee, who may take a step forward now that they're out of the Ken Norton Jr. era. But you could say that there's definitely upgradability at that part of the roster. The defensive line, especially the middle of that defensive line, we can upgrade that. The secondary now with the Conley news coming out, like you mentioned, lots of question marks there. Even if Conley's good to go, you want more depth there. Who's going to play nickel in this squad? There's several different answers to that question. So where we go in the first round for me is really a coin toss. And I think it was Stephen Michaels that mentioned, hey, you got Gruden as a head coach. Don't be shocked if they throw a curveball and go offense in the first round. Now, I think a lot of our fans would be disappointed if they did that, because this draft seems top heavy with defense, unless you're talking about a quarterback, which I don't see us doing in the first, or a running back, which, if you're going to go up there and grab Geis, Barkley's likely gone. I'm in fact not sold on Barkley as to where he's going to go. I think he's actually going to disappoint when you actually compare what he does with where he's picked. I'm not going to say he's going to be a complete bust, but I'm not talking about Barkley right now. So let me move on. So Geis, definitely a guy up there that can be grabbed if we're going offense. But my guys right now in the first round, I'm off Mika Fitzpatrick. I think we said in our last show he does a lot of things, but I don't see him doing one thing well. I think he relies a lot on his physical frame. I want a guy that has the intellect to play football despite what his physical limitations are. I think Woodson showed us late into his career that you don't have to be fast to show up before the ball. It's knowing where to be. That's what will put you ahead in the NFL. It's a game of intellect when you get to the NFL level. So my guys in that top round, I like Derwin James. People might think that's a step backwards considering we have two safeties on the roster that we've drafted in the last 5 years, the last 3 years even. I like Derwin James. I think he's probably the biggest talent defensively in the top of the round here. If a guy like Bradley Chubb drops to us, that would be like a Christmas present because I think having a bookend to go along with Mac, it doesn't fill the need in the middle of the line, but it definitely takes some relief off the middle of the line when you got two edge rushers like that. I'm firmly a believer in Bradley Chubb. Maurice Hurst, for me, still a gamble. I think that with everybody asking where's Hurst going to go, tells you Hurst is going to drop. I think he's not going to drop into the second, but I think he drops past 10 and becomes a little bit of a reach for us there. So that, to me, probably not going to happen. I like Denzel Ward. I don't like his height. I just talked about how physicality or your physical stature is not the biggest thing I'm looking at, but in terms of short corners, maybe I'm just a little bit shell-shocked there because of our recent history. But the guys that I like in that first round is if we were to trade back, get a guy like Oliver, Jair Alexander. I know Jackson was a hot name at first. I think he's quieted down a little bit because people are learning he's more of a man-to-man guy, doesn't play well in the zone, doesn't tackle well, not great run defender. So it's really a toss-up. I'd love to see us get Bradley Chubb by some miracle, quarterback getting a little too greedy, getting a little greedy and going quarterback there in the top of the round. And then, of course, there's the linebackers. There's Edmonds and there's Roquan Smith are the two names you're hearing flip-flopping a lot. And now you had mentioned earlier in the show with the San Francisco's Reuben Foster situation, hey, he's still on the roster. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what's going to shake out there. If I'm the GM, he's likely gone already, but I'm not. That's above my pay grade. But I think it definitely alters this draft between picks 9 and 10. The coin toss now looms large. And if you're a fan of Roquan Smith or Edmonds, there's a big chance that the Niners step up and grab either one of those guys. Now, I've been pretty critical of Roquan Smith just because I think he's not as multidimensional as he's sold to be. And I'm not saying anything new here. We see him struggle to get off blocks. He's not the big burly linebacker that you'd like, but he is fast. And he's got pretty good eyes, and we've had a hard time finding a coverage linebacker, and I think he would really fit the bill there. So he's not my pick, but ultimately I wouldn't be disappointed if we got Smith. I'd be curious to see how that plays out and see if maybe we can coach him up to disengage from blocks, maybe get a little bit more bulk on his frame. But he's definitely got sideline to sideline speed, and speed in the Oakland Raiders. Those things go together, and that really hasn't changed. So I know I'm a little bit all over the place here, but I think most people are when you really drill down and ask them who's the pick in the first round. That's hard to see, but I'd like to see us go defense in the first round with the Conley stuff coming out. Likely that one of those corners is going to be available there for us, and maybe wait until the second or third to draft a running back. And I really have this feeling, though, ultimately, linebacker is going to come late in this draft. Gunther's been pretty vocal about he can do a lot with value picks at linebacker. It's his scheme that gets these guys into positions, and I don't know that they're going to go linebacker all the way at the top. So I'm really feeling like it's going to be secondary in the first round, and you're going to see some offense come in those early to mid rounds. Second or third, you're going to get a guy. Taven Bryan is there as well. I'm all over the place here, Murph. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of talent in this draft. There's only 32 picks in the first round. Some of those guys are going to leak out into the second. I wouldn't be mad if we traded back 5 spots, but it's just really hard for me to pin this down. Where are you at in this draft, Murph? Shed some light on this for me. Help me stabilize a little bit because I'm bouncing around like a valence here. That's a chemistry term. Help me out, Murph.
Last year, I got accused of jumping off a cliff when we drafted Conley in the first round. We did a live draft show, and Reggie had me completely snowed, and I think a lot of Raider Nation, that we were going to take, based on what our needs were, an inside linebacker. And when you looked at the linebackers that were going to be available in the first round, it was Reddick, it was Foster, it was Cunningham, it was there was a bunch. There was 4 or 5 guys that were first round picks, and there was like 3 of them on the board at the time the Raiders picked. And then ultimately they didn't pull an inside linebacker until Corey James in the 5th round or whatever the heck it was. So I completely jumped off the cliff. So now I'm gun shy. So so everyone's talking Roquan Smith, but I don't know. And going what we went through last year, I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't know, because he completely went off the board on us last year. So it would not surprise me one bit to see Reggie go corner. But here's the thing. Reggie's not the guy making the call. And you've mentioned something earlier as well about how you weren't sure how the dynamic is playing out here. And I asked Matt Schneidman last week, what is the dynamic and what's the end game between Reggie and Gruden? He didn't really have a solid answer either. And I don't know if anybody knows. And without being inside the walls of Alameda, those are the only 2 guys that kind of understand, and maybe Mark Davis, what the dynamic is going to be. If I had to speculate and throw a dart based on my fandom of this team for a million years, is that Gruden's kind of shopping for the groceries, letting them know who he wants, and Reggie is going to make the pick or the acquisition and handle and make sure that it's a contract that's acceptable for what the Raiders' long-term goals are. That's kind of my feeling as far as how this is going to work. So knowing all of that and saying all of that to set this up, I think the Raiders are going to go with, if a guy like Vita Vea is on the board, I keep coming back to that name because of Gruden twice now has said in separate interviews how quarterbacks, like, you name it, the elite quarterbacks, Drew Brees is somebody that always comes to mind, can step up in the pocket to avoid that edge rush, and that when you get somebody big and in their face, how that it forces them side to side and it messes with their sight lines, it messes with their footwork. And if you can get a guy off balance, he's not nearly as accurate. And especially when you got a monster like Khalil Mack coming off one side and Irvin off the other. So I think that if that's him tipping his hand maybe a little bit, that they're going to look for an interior pass rush, then I think we could be looking at a guy like Vita Vea. Something interesting you brought up too, though, is if Chubb is there, Bradley Chubb, not Nick, but Bradley is there.
Yeah.
That's monstrous, because then, like if I were to ask you who the defensive tackle was of the Houston Texans, like, I don't know, because they have Jadeveon Clowney and J.J. Watt. They don't need it. They just need to put somebody there. So if you have elite pass rushers off the edge like that, we see what kind of havoc that can wreak. So if that could be a very, very interesting option for the Raiders as well. But I'm with you. I think that the inside linebacker talk is just that, because of Gunther's influence on this. And we've already seen that guys like Gunther, guys like Bisaccia, they're going to get the players that they want. Gruden he may be a control guy, but he is definitely delegating to his coaching staff as far as and appealing to what their wants are as far as personnel perspective. So, if you're telling me that Gunther is going to make the call or be able to work with value in the lower rounds, Reggie's already shown us that he's not going to be a guy that's going to pull a linebacker in the high rounds. Mm-hmm. Now we got this thing with the Niners maybe having an inside linebacker pick at 9. I'm thinking that we're definitely to me it's whittling down a little bit. I think we're looking at corner, and if Ward's there, that's the slam dunk, right? I know that you mentioned his height, and I think that's a fair criticism. But I think purely from a talent perspective and from a need perspective, that's got to be the guy. So I think either him or Vita Vea. If I had to bet my mortgage on a draft, I would go between one of those 2 guys. But again, last year I thought I had it figured out too, like a lot of us did. And again, I ended up jumping off the cliff. So
Yeah, I was going to say the only problem with our analysis here, Murph, is it uses logic, and common mistake with Raider fans is using that logic. So I don't know, but yeah, I didn't mention Vea. I was high on him early on. I don't see him being like a multi-technique guy, but he does have the bull rush and the ability to just get in your face. And when you got guys coming off the edge like Irvin and Mack, maybe that's all you need. So I wouldn't be mad at that pick either. And I'm not going to throw my hands up if we draft Ward. I'm going to be all about that kid. He's got lots of talent. Kane, that's his favorite player in the draft this year. And then you're looking at a secondary possibly now with, Ward, Melvin, and if Conley ever gets back to health, that's a trifecta that I really like. I really like that.
That's legit. And especially too, if, we got so many unknowns, with our defense, go back to the line, a guy like Vanderdoes, balled out early in the year and then kind of fell off, but had some injuries he was dealing with. But with the unknowns with Conley and Melifonwu, and really, I mean, Carl Joseph is starting to kind of come into his own, but you really want, the idea of that big safety that can cover, the Travis Kelce's and Rob Gronkowski's of the world and Hunter Henry and anybody else that we're going to have to deal with. That idea that maybe that takes the need off of that outside linebacker to do that, and we could just stick Bruce Irvin on the line and let him go after the quarterback and not have to worry about covering him. But there's just so many unknowns, man, that so many moving parts that it's like you said, we could put all the logic to it that we want, but there's just so much still that's kind of unknown that it makes it tough, man. This to me is at least in recent memory one of the most unique drafts for the Raiders, not only from the talent that's available, but the talent that we have that's already unknown, and the internal dynamics of Reggie and Gruden. Matt mentioned last week that he thought that this potentially, he wasn't putting a pin in it, but he said that he kind of felt like this might be a 1-year trial for Reggie, and I'm like, holy cow! Like, is that like this guy's career, essentially his legacy? Could be defined. It won't be the 2014 draft. It'll be the 2018 draft that defines Reggie McKenzie's legacy for the team. Like that's a lot. That's a lot going on, man. Like that's a big deal. So I don't know, man. This is very, very interesting for us going into this offseason for sure.
Lots of storylines. It'll definitely make your head spin if you stare at it too long. They need to maybe release some special sunglasses to watch this draft with.
I know that's true. Absolutely. I don't know what our plans are for the draft. I think we'll probably do another live draft show again. You guys got anything special planned for the draft?
Well, we'll be doing a show that night. I have I'm in between jobs, so I got a week off here before I start my new job. So I'm going to be dialing in the live video streaming this week so we can get that up and running. We made a stab at it before, had some technical difficulties. I got all that sorted out. So we're not planning on doing a live draft show, but we will be live that night, likely starting right after the pick occurs, and then maybe chronicling some of the later picks after that as we do our show. So I got a special guest lined up for that. I would be looks like I'm going to be doing that interview tomorrow and banking it. It'll be a former Raiders legend, a guy that's been on your show. I'm not going to say anything else. I don't want to jinx it because I'm still chasing right now. But it looks like we're going to be jumping on the air right after that pick happens and just sort of detailing that for you guys, talking about it, giving our thoughts about it. Murph's already told you it's available wherever podcasts are found. And just like you guys now, we have our own little fancy app. So all of you guys that are listening to Raiders Fan Radio, make sure you download the Pillaging app on iOS or Android and snuggle that icon right next to the Raiders Fan Radio icon, just so you know where to go for all of your diehard Raiders fan content every single week.
Absolutely. I love it, man. Good deal. Well, hey, listen, congratulations on the success so far. Congratulations on where your show is going. You guys got a great thing going over there. Definitely consider you guys peers of ours in terms of knowledge and production quality and just fun. It's a fun show to listen to. So anybody that likes our show, I know they will like yours as well. So definitely check these guys out. It's Pillaging Just for Fun. It's the Pillaging Podcast. They're part of the Out of Pocket Sports Network. At Pillage Just for Fun, the number 4 Fun on Twitter. He is Kenny Stapler, and man, I can't thank you enough for joining me here on the show. I feel like new old friends, man. Like I feel like I could talk to you all night about the dang Raiders, and we hadn't even talked about being San Jose brethren yet. Like I mean, holy cow!
True.
Like you know what I mean. So I really appreciate you joining us here on Raiders Fan Radio, and looking forward to catching up with you again in the future for sure, man. Let's definitely do this again.
Yeah, let's do it. I had a great time, and it's time to get you on over on our pirate ship. We'll extend the plank a little bit, and you can walk on over and return the favor, and we'll keep it moving going forward. I'm glad to be partnered with you guys. This has been fantastic.
Absolutely, man. Well, good deal. Well, definitely look forward to that, and cool, man. Any parting words for Raider Nation? Any message for Raider Nation before we let you go?
Go Raiders.
Hey, Raider Nation, are you out there? It's Uncle Mosh. I got a couple questions for you. Hey, what are you wearing right now? Nah, this isn't getting all weird. I'm sitting here and I'm sporting my Raiders Fan Radio shirt. That's right, we got merchandise now. And you too can have one of these nice, I'm saying, Raiders Fan Radio shirts by going to RaidersFanRadio.com. I mean, who wouldn't want to wear one of our shirts? You need to do this, and you need to do it quick. You know why? Because the price is set right now. It's set so low. It's so low, we're afraid that it's going to go up faster than an avocado sandwich at a 49er play date. You know what? Even the redheaded cousin wears one of these when he's not drinking the donkey Kool-Aid. All right, get out there. Order your shirt. RaidersFanRadio.com. I need the money.